Another one, exhausting. I can see him in my mind's eye, oldish, thinnish, bearded, leaning over his laptop and typing, quote, "This is not my country. I thought this country was, but Trump has changed it from A, a democracy, B, the home of equality and justice, or and C, a beacon therefore to the world. But now I see what he has done to this our paragon. Now where's the bourbon?" End quote. A less drunk and delusional woman will evince astonishment that her fellow Americans have democratically elected this grim reaper. Now, I hang out with them and I ask, this began with him? It is only him and a campaign of honor by the pious that allowed you this brave but not really epiphany? A fist shake at his voters? Your new hates, 72 million, and a Facebook self-righteousness that millions yay for you? For the first time in history, folks, by some astonishing corruption, my shiny city is not shiny. I don't press them to realize how nasty the country was before it committed this Trump folly, nor even that the nastiness predates us by hundreds of years, was contrived that way from the founding, and will not change while Americans still need a past of Lassie and a present of billionaires. In 1973, I was 17. On 9/11 of that year, 1973, I walked 9/11. I walked down a London high street to a bookshop where a tiny black and white TV was broadcasting the coup in Santiago, Chile. Nobody in that small shop had any doubt who was behind this butchery. From 11 to 17, I was here being told we were defending our way of life from the impending threat of Vietnam paddling their sampans up the Delaware and stealing our White House. I will ask then, why do they need it to be so, this false and fantasy history? Wouldn't admission of genocide and slavery and suitable and monetary atonement allow a better night's sleep? Why is the opposition necessary? Instead of confessing to sin, you say we are sinless. Extraordinary. A liberation from your need of a fantasy history, an excising of Deuteronomy from the good books. Imagine that your touchdowns are not from God and your addictions are not from Satan or Mexico, that you are responsible, you and all your neighbors in all their various colors and cultures, for whether or not the planet survives. That your great need to be thought good and those you don't like, therefore bad, can be headed off and appeased before you enter public school, where unfortunately these notions are encouraged. That only the deeply insecure favor competition over collaboration past the age of 5. Do you feel better now? No, I'm sure not. You are in the grip, far gone. Or is it that the job of brainwashing in the United States was so complete and skillfully done that anyone but the most hardy would be took in, like you were admitting you were? Or that it is easier to blame the 72 million for your than yourself? That life really was a box of chocolates till Trump stole them. Chocolates that come from West Africa and Latin America, where you know Clinton and Obama worked hard for living wages for pickers of the pods. Facetious. Then I would say, no, you are not the worst nor the first, but you are steadily in the top 5 of the world's greatest exploiters and abusers, and exceptional as the last of the holdouts, the exceptional of the deniers. Bravo. It doesn't make you a bad people at all. It is only in the need to believe you are the best that you become intolerable. You, any of you, wherever you come from on this planet, your endless quest to be better than all the rest does render you the worst. Your religious try to be sinless has never worked. And yes, you should have known. It was easy to see. And all the demonizing of Russia and China and Islam won't stand up anymore. Your children are quicker than you. The city isn't shiny, it's filthy. It can be cleaned up with that forgotten skill set. So do I struggle with this? I think I do struggle with this because I want to insist that this is not, I am not doubling the sin, right? I'm not saying, don't interpret these terms in your terms, which are that somehow genetically, constitutionally, racially, intellectually, this is a superior civilization. It isn't. And it is made worse by the fact that it insists that it is. Right? It's simply not true. You can choose and you can say, well, you know, it's better than living in China. Well, for some people, it is better than living in China. China, it should be said, has raised more people out of poverty than any capitalism ever did. That's a fun, self-serving mythology. My boy there, Gary Stevenson, was pointing out that for most of history, except for a very small 20th century period, in the West and the rest of the world, 90% of people have lived in abject poverty, and 1% have lived with absolute wealth and power. And that distribution of wealth has never been just. It is only made sense by civilizations that decided that the 90% were inferior. They were animals. They were less than. The 10% were God-anointed. They were super talented. They came from the right families. They came from the right race. They came from the right culture. All of those things are delusions. We've written about this in all the books. Thomas Jefferson even stumbled into it with his great lie, all men are created equal. Of course, he didn't mean it, because he wasn't they weren't culturally there for that. But this economic divide, which we lived with, as Stevenson points out, and I pointed out, since the agricultural revolution, we have lived with this stark inequality. And then somehow, after the Second World War, the brakes were put on it. It still existed. The inequality still existed. The elitism still existed. The insistence on racial superiority and cultural superiority, intellectual superiority, the superiority of the Western canon, for God's sake. A more boring bunch of literature you'd be hard put to find, but just an obsession. Europeans obsessed with Europeanism. Europeanism is called self-called the great achievement culture, the greatest culture ever, and so it has its canon, its literature that supports that reality. Step outside of that reality. Find that reality unnecessary. And you've got a lot of really interesting books to read. Not written by the Russians or the English or the Spanish or the French or the Germans or the whatever. You know, give yourself a break. So that's the issue is that. And I'm not sure. I'm just not sure. I'm beginning to realize that part of that is this. It is the need to believe that. The problem that Trump might be asserting it is a problem, absolutely. But I didn't see I saw no difference on the Democratic side on any essential level. I don't see any difference. Because they are not him, it does not change the fact their arguments about genocide were just as corrupt. And it ran all the way through the party. It runs all the way through the supposed progressive Western thought. So carry on. we are back now. We're back in, we're back in the Middle Ages with a fast developing servant-serf class. We've outsourced much of our agricultural work. We've outsourced our industrial work. So we become very much like Rome, dependent on slaves all over the world. And fewer and fewer of us live really banal, stupid lives. I think that's the thing that I have with the critics, even Gary Stevenson, is you have to say at some point, there's still this lingering notion that the very wealthy, the 1%, the 10%, have somehow earned their wealth. They haven't. They're parasites. The system is created to serve parasites. The aristocracy of Europe for the last 2,000 years has been parasitic. We had this brief 20th century change after the Second World War, marginal tax rates at 90% and stuff like that. We created something in the socialist states and in the capitalist states. Something happened. But it takes one Reagan and one Thatcher, and boom, the floodgates are open. We're rushing back to the Middle Ages. Except now, the only difference now is that the peasants are better educated, and they will revolt.